Come to me. Closer, a little closer, until your darkness intertwines with my emptiness to form one pitch blackness. Once you've faced me, you'll become darkness yourself.
Bless my stars, that's a horrible voice. Just wow. Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. Today we're going to talk about the new upcoming ML5, Archdemon Shadow, her horrible voice, and if you should pull her. Also, we'll go over some build options potentially and just my overall thoughts. Before we get into all that though, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, please check the video description below for a link to my Discord. Okay, so let's go through the skills first. That'll give us an idea about what type of hero this is, and then we can look at her stats, and how she might be used in RTA. So skill 1 is Touch of Chaos. This has a 50% chance to seal the enemy for 2 turns before attacking with lightning. It's a 10 soul burn cost, which can increase it to 100% effect chance, and through skill ups you can raise it above 50% to, it looks like, 75%. So seal is a new mechanic. This is her big thing. It is essentially silence for passives. The passives do not activate if an enemy is debuffed with seal. And very importantly, you have to read this skill closely to catch that the seal lands before the attack is factored into it. So this is, the seal will be treated like Flurry's debuff, where it can get around evasion, like Rylet. It's not going to trigger any passives that are triggered by attacks, so you don't have to worry about that, like ML Tywin. We'll go into that in a bit. But the fact that the seal debuff lands before the attack does essentially turns this from complete garbage to usable to extremely good, depending on how the meta sorts out with her. It's necessary for it to be this way, otherwise it would essentially be unusable. So overall, understanding how seal works is going to be really important to determining if she's going to be a viable hero in RTA, and the seal is on her skill 1. I don't know about this soul burn here. We've seen with heroes in the past that don't have 100% chance to land their debuffs, that they're very underwhelming. You've seen that with Viseria. Having to soul burn to get that feels a little weak to me, so I think that's something to factor in as well. Skill 2 is Twisted Power. This decreases damage suffered by a critical hit by 20%, so it's a built-in adamant shield for her, similar to Little Queen Charlotte. When one or more damage reduction effects is granted, only the strongest is applied. So this is just the usual text. This doesn't stack with Adamant Shield. It's just going to replace it, depending on the level of your Adamant Shield, or maybe Adamant Shield could replace it. Whichever is the stronger effect will be applied. After using Touch of Chaos, Archdemon Shadow has a 35% chance to activate Burst, and this effect chance is doubled when the target is sealed. And as you skill it up, she gets even more crit damage reduction. Looks like it goes up to 30% total. So what is Burst? Burst attacks all enemies, so this is an AoE attack with a 60% chance to decrease hit chance for 1 turn. That's a very powerful debuff, before increasing the caster's combat readiness to 25%. So this is just kind of like a bonus damage ability stacked on top of her passive, which reduces her damage reduction. I think having this built-in Adamant Shield is incredibly powerful. We've seen that with Little Queen Charlotte. It's going to allow you to build her quite tanky if that's the route you decide to go. Having built-in survivability, we've seen time and time again, is extremely key, for heroes to be viable in RTA. So it's good that she has that. The burst here, this is kind of giving me PTSD and flashbacks to Mort, but it seems a little random. How often are you going to be able to have targets sealed and going to be able to activate burst? I could see this activating at the wrong time, since it is an AoE ability. You could AoE when you don't want to, and trigger SSB. Batback, for example, would just be one example off the top of my head. You could trigger Tywin Cleanse, potentially, if he isn't sealed, wiping away an important provoke or defense break, something along those lines. So the RNG can definitely go both ways with this. The damage, I guess, will be okay since it's an AoE ability, And 60% chance to decrease hit chance for 1 turn is a very strong debuff. So that's going to be very annoying if this is triggering a lot, constantly putting hit down on the enemy team. I could see that being very frustrating to deal with. Skill 3 is Disillusion. This is another AoE attack, and it has, looks like a 75% chance base to inflict 2 burns for 2 turns. And that can go up to 100% once you skill it up. So there's a 100% chance to burn everything for 2 turns. So that is a lot of burn. And it's something that will really clog up the opponent cleansers, if you have all these extra debuffs coming out. So that's good. The skill cannot trigger a counterattack, thank goodness. Burst also should not be able to trigger a counterattack because it's like an extra attack, kind of like SSB's Batback, I think. So I don't think that'll trigger a counter either. And then this also grants the caster an extra turn. This is not an ability you're going to be able to use out of the gate. It looks like you have to use 5 focus. And her skill 1, looks like that gives her a focus, and I think Burst also gives a focus. So this is going to be something that, kind of like Ravi's S3, you can't use it right away. You have to build up her resource and then consume it to use this S3, which does give her an extra turn. Like, that is very strong. So we've seen the multipliers for Archdemon Shadow, and they're not very strong. For that reason, I think, it's going to be hard to build her as a true damage dealer. The test for that, I think, will be how often Burst is triggered, and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen super frequently. I could be wrong about that. Seal is a 2-turn debuff, so hypothetically, if the opponent doesn't have a cleanser, the seals could kind of build up on people, and if you're using her in combination with heroes like Lilius or Cerise and kind of pulling her in to get those dual attacks into sealed units, you could really, I guess, trigger it quite a bit. So maybe she does put out some decent damage. I feel like her damage output is something that we're going to have to try and practice to really get a good handle on. ML Crow, for example, was somebody who didn't seem like he did a lot of damage on the surface, and then just using him, you realized how oppressive his damage really was. Getting that second skill 3 off with him, I mean, it hurts. So if Burst is being triggered left, right, and center, then I could see maybe, the pressure she puts on the opponent to be significant. That said, her skill 3 is a little underwhelming. For a skill 3 that consumes 5 focus, I mean, the extra turn is probably the biggest, flashiest part of this, but just putting burns on people is pretty underwhelming. I have Holiday Euphine with a ton of attack, and her burns do a lot of damage, but they're just stopped cold by immunity, and there's immunity buffers everywhere. So we'll talk a little bit about that more once we look at her stat line, and potential uses for her. But this skill 3 seems a little empty for an ML5, if I'm going to be honest. Alright, here's the stat line for Archdemon Shadow. You can see that she is an Aquarius, which means that she's going to have the same star sign as Basar, and that's going to mean medium speed. She's not a potato, but she's not a Zoom Zoom Cerise type unit. The defense is going to be nice. Basar has good defense, so it's really easy to build him with high defense. His health is pretty mediocre, and so is hers. The attack is a bit above average. There is a little bit extra effectiveness built in here through her awakenings, and no extra crit chance. Her imprints are interesting. She gives health for 2 people. For the release and for the concentration, it's attack. So if you're going to build her DPS, the imprint concentration will be useful. Otherwise, you're just probably going to go with the release to give your party a bit extra survivability. So in terms of these stats, how can we, foresee her being built? I think that she is probably going to be built tanky, and I think she's probably going to be built fast, and with some amount of effectiveness. The new RTA changes, you don't need to run 200-300 effectiveness for kind of long drawn out games, because the frenzy is going to give you a bunch of free F and make effect resistance kind of pointless to use. So I think the sweet spot for her will probably be around 100 effectiveness with at least 200 speed if you run her on counter set, and then probably like 240, 250 speed maybe on speed set. Note that her kit didn't have any baked in strip abilities, so immunity is going to be a huge problem for her, so you're going to have to bring a stripper with her. Otherwise, her seal, her burns, all that stuff, the hit down, it's just going to get completely countered. So when I saw her, the first thing I thought was, here's another unit that you can't take into ML Crow, because what a disaster that would be, if you proc burst like repeatedly at the wrong time or something like that, and his stacks just, or his ultimate just gets almost fully reset because of that. So that said, if you're able to get rid of the immunity and seal ML Crow, I guess then she can handle him. So that's interesting. It doesn't look like she has the stat line or the multipliers to really go like full DPS, but maybe some people will try that. Maybe some cleavers. I don't know in a control team how that would fit, but I think having high attack and burn, so you're going to get some maybe decent damage from that. We've seen with Holiday Yuffie, if you get like 4k plus attack, the burns hurt, and she's putting two turn burns on everybody with her S3, so that could be some solid damage there, I guess. That's interesting. Yeah, I think that in terms of using this unit, we're going to have to consider what type of team we'll put her with. So let's go ahead and open up the hero journal and take a look at how Seal might interact with some of those heroes and what type of teams you might want to build around, or what type of teams this unit could cause problems with, and when you would want to bring Archdemon Shadow. Alright, so we have the hero journal opened up here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at not every single hero, but many of the heroes that are very influential in the RTA meta now, that have passives, and we can use that to maybe extrapolate what scenarios Archdemon Shadow would shine in. So the first here is obviously Ambitious Tywin. He is a huge threat, and he fits into control teams, he fits into bruiser teams, he fits into those kind of pseudo-control-y cleave teams, so he's omnipresent everywhere right now. His passive cleanses debuffs whenever he's hit, so whenever he has a 100% when it's skilled up, chance to dispel one debuff from all allies when an ally is debuffed after the caster is attacked. So this is something that Archdemon Shadow Seal will shut down, because the seal gets applied before the hit does. So the seal gets applied, his passive goes away, then he gets hit. Passive can't cleanse anything because it's sealed. So if you are playing as a control player, do you want to bother sealing Ambitious Tywin? Potentially, yeah. I mean, that could be strong. You would really want to soul burn it to make sure that that happened, though, because hypothetically, if you seal him or if you S1 him and then the seal doesn't land and he ends up cleansing everything anyways, and maybe you weren't going to hit him otherwise, you could have just ignored him and bypassed his passive that way. So I think that it could work in that scenario. That said, he's still going to be able to S3, which is really huge. He's still going to be able to S1, which takes away souls from you. If you are a bruiser player and you're going against a Tywin, is sealing him really that big of a deal? I don't think so. It's nice that he cleanses debuffs from the enemy bruiser team, if you're doing bruiser versus bruiser, but his real big threat is the S3, and she doesn't do anything about that. So against a Tywin, I could maybe see her used in like a full control team, but it's just not that impressive, because stunning him is effectively going to do the same thing. Overwhelming him is effectively going to do the same thing with just a ton of debuffs. He can't keep up. And if you stun him, then he can't use his S3, and that's way better. So I think kind of mediocre against Ambitious Tywin, but it is a nice plus. So Tywin is a big one. Maid Chloe has that passive heal. Last Rider Crow we talked about, his passive, that puts shields up on everybody and reduces the cooldown on his S3. That's a big effect. If you seal him, then he can't get the stacks, and he can't reduce the cooldown of his ultimate there, so that's significant. Again, though, you have that problem with immunity, so you're going to have to bring her with buff strippers, otherwise they're just going to put up immunity and then you're going to be sad. Fallen Cecilia could be a nice one, kind of a value thing to shut down so that she doesn't give barriers to people when she takes a turn. Kind of like Basar's unbuffable on everybody. It's noticeable when she doesn't put her barriers up. You feel the pressure and that loss of protection that the barriers would have given. So that's a very, very value thing right there to do with her S1. Let's see, who are some other... so Champion Zerato is an interesting one. Champion Zerato has a passive here. He's going to counterattack if he has a debuff. Sealing this first before hitting will prevent that from happening, and it will prevent him from doing that, and that's really his main gimmick to counteract debuff teams, is that he counters and then transfers the debuffs back onto them. He's immune to stun, so you can't get him under control that way anyway, so it's kind of an additional answer that control players could have to Champion Zerato. If you are a cleaver, I don't think you would use her against him because you don't care. You're just going to damage and kill him. And if you are a bruiser player, you probably just don't care about him because you're bruisering and you're not really debuffing too much. So in this scenario against Dorado, it seems more of the control team might be able to draft her in that case to counteract him. Let's see, who else do we have here? Bryceria, I guess you can take away your hit chance. Seems kind of like a minor thing. ML Haste passive, this could be really strong to shut down if you have Ruel on your team or if you have RB on your team and you don't want the opponent to get that huge barrier on everybody, and having Haste S3 reset, it's a nice thing to shut down. All of these things that I pointed out up to this point, though, are kind of like, they're nice benefits, but do they really justify a full slot on your team? That I'm not so sure about. I'm obviously skipping some here. We're just kind of getting an overall flavor. Let's see. SSB is an interesting one. Should be down here somewhere. SSB's deal, though, is a little tricky because if you miss the seal, she's still going to do all her stuff. She still has S3, but she's typically built very slow. So if you do seal her, it does solid work because it's really going to prevent her from... I guess it also prevents the damage share, so it makes her more vulnerable. It prevents her from gaining focus. It prevents the bat back. So the seal does quite a bit if it lands on her. If it doesn't, I think you're in trouble. It doesn't prevent the S3. It doesn't prevent her S1, obviously. Let's see. Let's go back up to the gold units. Fighter Maya is somebody who is seeing more use in the meta these days. She has a passive which is pretty strong because so many people are drafting debuff teams. She cleanses herself. So this could be a potential use if you are doing the either control team or the kind of like hybrid control cleave setup where people draft F Maya into that. You're going to prevent her from dispelling buffs, so that's going to really like let you completely lock her down and control her. So that's actually pretty strong. It'll also prevent her from getting the defense buff when attacked. So, and Fighter Maya is often somebody who is not built on immunity, so that's important. The ability to completely shut her down like that is, I think, really strong. She's oftentimes built really slow, so she's not going to, shake the debuff off. She'll still get her S3 and her S1 when she does get a turn, but she's not a turn cycling machine like Cerise or anything, so she's going to kind of sit there doing nothing for a long time if you get her sealed. So I could see that being a really strong choice against Fighter Maya if you're either doing pure control or if you're doing the control cleave type setup that we talked about. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Let's see, Tempus Siren. Here's another unit that is oftentimes drafted into, these controlling teams. You're going to shut that off. The ability for her to go into stealth, get CR pushed, to take decreased damage. So you're effectively going to seal her and then just one-shot her, I guess. If you have enough damage on your Mercedes, you could just pop her. Although probably not on the S1. I doubt you're going to do like 9 or 10k on an S1. So probably not, but that would be cool if it happened. So T-Siren is definitely somebody that you could shut down. So overall, I think that, let's see, so we have our 3 big archetypes. We have Cleave, Control, and Bruiser. It seems like she might be a niche pick in Bruiser teams if your opponent has a lot of passive abilities that you get value, like if they have units like FCC, for example, if they have units like Maid. There's a lot of those kind of like value passives that just build up advantage slowly over the course of a match. She's going to be good at counteracting that. I feel like she's going to have to do something in addition to that to be worth taking. So you'd probably have to run her on Crown to give her the stuns, to give her that added value in that scenario. And you'd have to probably draft her with, I don't know, like Alencia or Bassar or something like that to give you the strips. Or Cerise, I suppose, would be good, because then you get the dual attacks with even more seals. So yeah, Cerise would be a good one to take with her. In terms of control teams, she might be a niche pick in shutting down units like Champ Z or Fighter Maya. So nice to have that as an option. For the Cleave players, I don't think she'll be picked. I think it'll be hard to build her on damage because of her multipliers. And they honestly, they handle units like Champ Zerato by just blowing them up. So I don't think she'll fit into those. So let's see, if we were going to draft her in Control or Bruiser, we're going to want to build her thick, like we spoke about before, and we're going to want to build her probably like 200 speed for counter, and I would imagine like 230 or 240, something like that for speed set. Just so she turn cycles and gets even more focus built up and stuff. I assume that's the resource she uses, is focus. I can't remember. So let's take a look here at Basar. I have unit dyslexia. There's Basar. Okay, so this is just like stuff put on him right now, but you could literally build her this way. 250, and she's, you know, would be fairly tanky here at 1700 defense and almost 14k HP. And this isn't premium gear. Like, the gear's fine, but it's not, you know, the best of the best, so you could definitely get stats better than this, is what I'm trying to say. You could probably add some attack to her as well. I'm curious, I have not farmed a ton of Banshee, so I don't have a ton of counter gear to show off. I have some, you know, like usable, air quotes, counter gear on Dizzy, so we could see maybe what that looks like. I feel like Dizzy might have a better stat line for this type of build than Basar does, though. And then I think she's on immunity. Yeah, I mean, like, this is a garbage helmet. I guess it's just for speed. Alright. Dizzy, okay. So here's what Dizzy's gear would look like right now. So Basar / Archdemon Shadow is obviously slower than Dizzy, I guess, because I think this puts Dizzy at like 198 or something. And a little bit more HP as well, I think, on Dizzy too, but I don't remember. So this is maybe an example of counter, but you would have to get more speed. So probably like a neck with some speed or something like that. Bump her up to 200. You could build her, you know, like this. I think the counter build could be reasonable if you're slotting her into the bruiser team. I think if you're slotting her into a control team, you're going to probably just want to run her speed, since ideally the opponent is controlled and they're not hitting your units. And you're just going to get more value by her turn cycling. So I think she could work there. In all of these scenarios, though, she sounds really like kind of a last pick into a very specific draft. So I think her kit, on the whole, seems a little bit empty. Seal is a very interesting mechanic. Even, you know, I've thought quite a bit about this, and even just kind of going down the list of units, I even noticed a few other things, like how much she shuts down Fighter Maya. So that's interesting. So maybe she'll be a little bit better than I'm anticipating, but right now I anticipate her to be quite niche. I don't think you should pull her unless, you know, you're a whale, unless she's waifu, unless you're, you know, a diehard kind of control player and you think she might fit into your setup or something like that. Also keep in mind, they announced with her imprint system, she is going to be permanently available in the coin shop after her Mystic rotation ends. So even if you don't pull her on Mystics, you can get her with coins literally anytime you get coins. So that's going to be unlike any other ML hero to this point. She's always going to be in that store. So as long as you get coins, you'll be able to get her. I know that's easier said than done, obviously. The coins are hard to get. But let's talk about Artifact really quick, and then I think we'll call it a wrap. So I think Abyssal Crown will be very strong on her, but you're going to have to bring her with somebody that is going to be able to remove immunity if you do that. So somebody like Cerise, or, you know, we've talked about those options. I think that Book is going to be a very strong option on her in certain setups, particularly the kind of control-y teams that are going to want to make sure they get that seal right away. So I think Book would really be good there. And then I think another option that could be good on her would be Tea Time's Artifact, which I know I have somewhere. Here it is. This one just adds like flat damage to all of her abilities when it's not their turn. So if you put her on counter set, this, oh, sorry, I guess maybe this isn't that good actually. I was thinking it would work on burst, but I guess it doesn't. It's only when it's not on their turn. Yeah, that's pretty underwhelming. Never mind. That's Garbo. So yeah, pretty much just Book or Crown, probably. Maybe Syra Ren if you're running control, but I think Book would just be better. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other thoughts about her, what artifacts you might want to use, and if you'll be pulling. Otherwise, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Later.